Hello and welcome to Temple of Akasha, the home of embodied spirituality with me, Natasha. So today I would like to explore the question, what would love do? Because in my experience and in my heart, I feel that the reason we're here as humans experiencing a very dense dualistic plane is to return to love as often and consistently as we can in a world that feels very dissonant, polarized, where there's a lot of contrast. We are, as I've mentioned in previous videos, really being schooled on how to return to truth and return to love through our external experiences. And this is a lesson that I think is a lifelong lesson for all of us, but understanding how to move, breathe, live from love is my heart's deepest desire and purpose in this life. I know that I'm here to really embody and anchor the feminine way, which is living heart-led, which is living from love first. And so in the light of quite an uncomfortable but really illuminating conflict I had with someone recently, the question that has been arising in my consciousness is, what would love do? And that's what I want to transmit today, the teachings or perhaps the insights that I've mined from this experience, and really just pose that to you as a reflection if you're experiencing dissonance or conflict in your own life experience. Because when we're talking about love, the love of the divine, we're really not talking about conditional love. Conditional love says, I love you if, or I love you when. So there are conditions attached to that love. Conditional love tries to barter. Conditional love will try to withhold. You'll try to withhold from a place of conditional love, or you might try to punish by withholding love when you're coming from a place of conditional love, which really to me is not love, it's actually fear masquerading as love. And the divine invitation is for us to return to our true essence and our true heart nature, which is unconditional love, the unabiding love of the divine, which is always present and is encompassing of all experiences. And this is really challenging for the human, because at a human level, when we're experiencing dissonance or conflict, obviously there's hurt, and the natural tendency when that hurt arises is to withdraw, to armor, to protect, to defend. But what I've found and experienced directly is that the contraction and the pulling away of the heart, and the contraction and the stemming the flow of love is so painful, because it's going against our inherent nature, which is love. You know, at the deepest parts of our being, I believe that we are love. We're here to express love, to give love, to receive love, to radiate love, and to return to love every time we forget. And I had a conflict actually that kind of really peaked on the Gemini full moon on the 7th of December. That was really painful for my human, but I was held in love throughout the whole process, and I still am. And what I'm realizing is that the more I allow my life experiences to unfold without resistance, but I'm able to kind of witness them as well as feel them and move through the energy of them. And for as long as I continue to reorientate myself back to truth and love as soon and as consistently as I can, my field is becoming more and more fortified with love. That doesn't mean that I don't get triggered, because I do often, and you know, I'm navigating this human experience as best I can, but what I am devoted to is returning to love as soon as I can, as soon as it feels viable for me, and as consistently as I can. Because anything other than love at this point in my journey is not truth. And what we'll find in conflict or moments of dissonance with someone we love is the ego and the mind will have so many different responses to conflict, right? So we might want to punish the person, we might want to be avoidant, we might want to lash out, we might have lots of rage and anger that we want to kind of project onto that person. There are all these different avenues that the human wants to express its hurt, different avenues that we want to express hurt through, and none of those are wrong. But what I feel I'm being asked to do during each revolutionary cycle of like karmic clearing is how can I notice all of those human egoic responses, and how can I orientate and choose to come back to love? Where can I let more love into this situation? Asking myself what love would do in this situation. What is the most true and real thing in my heart in this situation? And the thing about asking what is the most kind of real and true thing in my heart right now is that requires a scary level of vulnerability. It requires a scary level of courage to really honor the truth of what's in your heart, because usually that will require you to be really vulnerable. So in my personal situation, I saw all these human responses to the conflict and how my human wanted to defend or attack or punish or withdraw or avoid and bypass the whole thing. And yet, because I feel almost without a choice really that I'm devoted to anchoring and returning to love, I have been asking, and I've been guided to ask, what is true and real in my heart? What response is the most real and true and visceral in my heart right now? And at the deepest level, it's just to feel the incredible amount of pain that is in my heart right now. And that's it. So, as I mentioned before, when we're hurt, what we'll tend to want to do is to control or manipulate in some way the external circumstances to either mitigate the amount of hurt we're feeling, to change the amount of hurt we're feeling. We might try and control or manipulate the other person from some conscious or subconscious base so that we can feel powerful, and that might temporarily diminish how much hurt we feel. And these are really all these strategies that we try and impose on our external circumstances. They're all just a means of us feeling less hurt. And actually the most vulnerable thing we can do when we're in pain in our hearts is to just be with the pain without trying to change it or manipulate it or control it or avoid it. So I'm going to briefly just touch on my experience that I had over the full moon to illuminate this point, and hopefully it will be a little bit clearer what I'm referring to on the other side. So a very succinct version of this story is that I met a soulmate, someone that my soul instantly recognized during connection about a month ago. Actually, it's been a really recent connection, and this is a person that lives in America, a guy that lives in America who's on this path of awakening, who has a YouTube channel also, who expresses and shares his experiences with the Kundalini, the path of the Kundalini. We connected, and there was instant soul recognition, and the container that we share is not really specifically any one thing. It's not particularly romantic or sexual or just friendship. It's kind of, there's a lot of light and a lot of love in the container, and it's not any one particular thing. It's just it's a really loving space. But because there's a lot of light in the container, that it also then illuminates a tremendous amount of shadow within both of us. And so the container really, just as you get with all of these really intense soul dynamics, twin flame relationships, and evolved soul dynamics, you'll come into contact with people who you have these contracts with to kind of draw up what is at the depths of your being, what has been in the basement for a long, long time that stops you embodying the frequency of love, basically. So that's what this dynamic did. We connected over the eclipse portal. And then the long story short is he's based in America, so he came to visit me last week. And he was only here for about 4 days. The time he was here, he was going through a difficult time. I was going through a difficult time. I'm house sitting for a child and a dog, and it wasn't easy conditions. And the dynamic kind of really fractured on the full moon when we got into like an altercation. And there was just a lot of either miscommunication or misunderstanding, or just the fact that both of us were in our own hurt, wounded places, and we were essentially communicating from wounding. But it escalated in such a way where a boundary for me was crossed, and I asked him to leave the space, and he did leave. And I haven't really heard from him since. So that was 5 or 6 days ago. And the experience was really, I think, could have potentially been really re-traumatizing for both of us, or was certainly very triggering for both of us. But I was kind of experiencing multiple levels of consciousness simultaneously. I was witnessing how essentially the situation was a karmic replaying of my childhood, how he was my dad and I was my mum. And I was having to be like a strong woman who I felt I was having to like protect the house and, you know, the inhabitants of the house and myself from an unstable man who was getting confrontational. And my mum, just as she did with my dad, she ejected my dad sometimes very physically from the house. And I then ejected this person from the house, essentially, because it no longer felt safe or comfortable to have him here. And so I was witnessing this kind of replaying of history. I was also witnessing his wounded parts playing out. I was also witnessing, almost like at the soul level, how we were both being schooled in contrast and polarity, and how much love can we hold in this space at this time. And it was immense. It was immense and really painful. And so he left, and I've not really heard from him since. After he asked me to take him back to the airport, and I said no, it didn't feel viable, and he's not contacted me since. And I got really worried about this individual because he wasn't in the best space. And I sent him multiple emails just asking for him to tell me if he was okay, and he hasn't responded to any of them. And so lots has been arising for me in the fallout of this. There's been tremendous amounts of anger and rage at the masculine, right? Rage at him, rage at my dad, rage at the patriarchy and all the ways in which I don't feel the masculine honors the feminine, you know, and tries to, maybe because there's some, I don't know, insidious kind of belief that to be vulnerable is to be weak, tries to impose like in a forceful way itself on the feminine. There was that kind of rage that's occurring. There's a rage and anger at being disrespected to the degree where someone that I love doesn't even have the decency to let me know they're okay and respond to what I feel were fairly loving messages or vulnerable messages. There's just sadness and grief at the fact that this is a soulmate and I feel the soul in the connection. And yet there's, for me, as I've mentioned, it feels so not viable to stay anchored in a place of division for very long. I can certainly get there, believe me, but it's like my soul, I'm so aware that love is available in any moment that it's like I can sit and stew in it for a while, and then it's like, no, it feels too painful to be anchored in separation and division. Even though it's going to mean I have to be really vulnerable, I would rather return to love. I would rather return to the unity and cohesion of being heart connected to another being. And I think there's a lot of grief and sadness present that hasn't necessarily been reciprocated, at least at the human level. So there has been a tremendous amount of kind of fracturing in this, at the physical kind of human level in this connection. But what the experience has really shown me, and there have been multiple lessons that I want to share from this experience, that I'll include those other, I'll share those other lessons in other videos. But the thing I really want to focus on today is the love aspect, in how a situation that's so polarizing, so painful, so difficult on the heart, how we could use that as a portal to return to love. Because often we want to get around it, right? It's like, this is the hurt. It's there, it's dense, it's painful, it's full of mess and discomfort. And so the human and the ego will try and find all the different ways around it, right? But actually the only way is through. The most true way is through. Because the pain actually cracks us open to deeper layers of love. When we try and bypass the pain, avoid it, deny it, we are denying the heart and what is true in the heart. And I think we, as with all things, we can get into absolutes where we think, oh, I'm connected to my heart when I feel love and joy and bliss. But when I feel sadness, grief, rage, disappointment, confusion, things in my heart that feel uncomfortable, something's wrong. The divine invitation is to recognize that it's all valid. Everything that your heart feels is valid. You don't need to bypass or work your way around any of it. It's all valid. It all has a part. It all plays a part in your evolutionary process. And although this process with this individual has been really painful, I have felt so much love for myself during this process because I've been so connected to my heart, or I've reconnected to my heart regularly during this process. There have been times when I've disconnected and I've played out an aspect or a storyline that isn't in the highest good, you know, like I've sent like a charged email, like, how dare you, blah, 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 which I think is also valid given the circumstances. But I keep orientating myself back to love. And the most loving thing is to love myself and my human, and how difficult the situation is for me, to love myself through it, to honor that everything I'm feeling, the grief, the disappointment, the confusion, the sadness, the anger, that's all valid. To also honor and love his humanity too, and everything he's experiencing. And I don't know what he's going through right now. That's been another part that's been really difficult for me, to not know where he is, to not know how he is. The aspect that wants to control, right? Wants to know. Because once I know, then I can orientate myself accordingly. So being in that space of the unknown is also really, really difficult for the ego, because it means that we don't have any control. We're really in a place of vulnerability and we're having to surrender. And so really, when we're moving through these polarizing experiences, the invitation is just to continue to ask as often as we can. You know, we're not always going to be able to stay there and be in the space of love and the heart, but to come back to the heart and to ask, what would love do in this situation? Because for me, you know, this individual left like half his clothes here. An aspect of me wants to burn them. The part of me that's like fierce and like is like, fuck you, fuck the patriarchy, fuck the wounded masculine, wants to burn his clothes. The part of me that wants to be avoidant wants to block his email and never hear from him again. The part of me that feels lack or a real kind of has a lot of difficulty in not knowing, wants to continue to email him like, what's going on? Why aren't you responding to me? These are all the aspects that I'm just witnessing, and there are others too. And the highest thing, like the most true thing I can access, and it's subtle. It's like, if I'm really not present, I could miss the truth. That's the thing about connecting to heart truth. If we're not really present, we could miss it. It's subtle but unwavering. And the truest thing in this situation is to just be with what is right now, and to not know, and to be in the space of the unknown. Will I ever speak to this individual again? Will I, you know, just all these unknown variables, and the pain in my heart and the love that's also there. Can I just be with all of that for now and not try and change it or control it or manipulate it, and just be with it? So this morning I had a Sananga ceremony. Sananga is like a type of plant medicine that you dispense in the eyes. I sat with cacao, I administered some Sananga, I let myself cry, I let myself feel very deeply the grief in my heart. I let myself move, I let myself just sit in stillness, and in the presence of the loving holding space of the divine that I feel strongly throughout all of this. I let myself just soak in that. And I also felt his soul presence come to me. And that was very soothing too, because it reminded me that beyond the 3D, beyond this kind of simulation that we're experiencing of division and separation, we are always lovingly connected at the level of the soul. And that is the truth. So when I'm talking about this field of love always being available, it's because at the higher dimensional, in the higher dimensional realms, at the higher vibrational level, we are connected by the field of love and unity. We are. There is no separation. As we move up in vibrational frequency and as we connect more deeply to the resonance of the heart, there is no separation. But at the physical level, the world presents as separate. We present as separate. And so it was a really beautiful reminder that there is love always available in this connection. Just because it's not necessarily being expressed at the human level doesn't mean it's absent. And that's actually something that I learned healing my twin flame connection this year as well. That we grieve because we feel we've lost love. But actually at the deepest and highest levels of our consciousness, love never goes anywhere. And so while the grief is valid, in a sense, there's also nothing to grieve, because love is always present. The love doesn't go anywhere. Even if at the human level it's not being exchanged or it's being withheld or avoided, the love never goes anywhere at the deepest level. And it's always available to us in our hearts. So I wanted to share this because this is the message that is just most present in my heart right now. What would love do? And that's the invitation on this feminine path of living and leading from the heart to continue to return to the most loving choice, not the easiest choice, not the most satiating choice for the ego. What is the most loving choice that we can make in each moment? And when we're considering the most loving choice, that inherently requires us to consider not just ourselves, but the ecosystem, the divine field and the ecosystem of which we are intrinsically a part of. So what I've also realized is if we are only focusing on ourselves, we're not actually deeply connected to love. If we're only focusing on others, we're not actually deeply connected to love. Love considers all, right? Love is kind of unified in its expression. So when we're considering what the highest and most loving course of action is, we consider ourselves and others, and we consider the totality of the situation. And so I invite you to just drop into that space with me for a moment. It's so present in my heart. So let's just go there for a moment. I'm going to invite you to just drop into your heart space. Let's take 3 conscious breaths together. Breathing in, and as you exhale, dropping down into the center of the chest and setting that intention right away to connect with your beautiful, loving heart. Another inhale and exhale to sink even more deeply into the heart space. And a third breath to drop in, dropping all resistance, all stories or ideas, and just being with your tender, vulnerable, beautiful heart. And just taking a moment to check in and ask your heart, what is real and true for you in this moment? What is real in your heart right now? And not trying to control or manipulate or change whatever is present, whatever is presented from your heart, by your heart. Just being with your heart's vulnerability in this moment. What is real? What is the truth of your heart? Having the courage to acknowledge that. It's so freeing when we acknowledge that too. It takes a lot of energy to try and create all these workarounds around pain or discomfort or difficult truths. It's so freeing to just be with what's present. And if you're experiencing a situation where there is dissonance or disharmony or conflict or uncertainty in your external reality, I invite you to ask your heart, what would love do? What is the most loving thing that I can do in this moment? Knowing that it's not our responsibility or our place to control, manipulate, or change another person or their response. The only thing we have governance over is our own response, and we have the choice. It's difficult, but we have the choice in each moment to choose to act from love, to choose the divine path, to choose the vulnerable, sacred path of the heart. So asking your heart, what is the most loving thing I can do? And knowing that you don't even have to act necessarily on what comes through, but just acknowledging it will help to liberate the aspects of you that maybe you've been in denial of. Will help to liberate the aspects that just want to be seen and heard and witnessed. And if your hands aren't already there, I invite you to just bring your hands to your heart center and to really just be in a state of love with that beautiful, tender, vulnerable, loving heart of yours, which is your compass in this life. And when you start listening to the heart, when you start establishing a relationship with your heart, life will begin to flow for you in a more easy and effortless way, because you are always aligning with truth. That's not to say that life will be easy, but that's to say that the choices, the way you respond, will always be fairly simple and easy, because your orientation will always be towards truth and love. It's the simplest path and also the one that requires the most courage. So just taking a moment to honor whatever is present in your heart, thanking your heart for its vulnerability. Maybe just taking a few more moments to witness if there's anything you need to do, any way that your heart wishes to express. You could do that now, pause the video, or you could do it after this video. Do you need to cry, move, scream, shake, draw, sing, dance, laugh, hum? Is there any way that the heart wishes to express in this moment? Hug, hold, apologize, be held. Thanking our heart portals for serving as such beautiful reminders of what's possible for us. And when you're ready, you might begin to bring some movement back into the body and open your eyes to join me when you're ready. What would love do? That is the divine invitation. In each and every moment, what would love do? What would love do? Because that is the highest truth. That is the highest truth. That is the truth that we are returning to individually and collectively, slowly. We're having to go through many different karmic clearing cycles in order to get back to that, but we're getting there slowly as the age of Aquarius unfolds. We're returning to an anchored, grounded, and unified truth. And we're returning to the feminine way. We're returning to the heart-led way after many millennia of patriarchal and wounded masculine programming. And in one of my next videos, I'll be sharing some wisdom, particularly for the ladies out there, with regards to how we are being asked to step up and move forwards. Because the feminine is the leader of the new world. Not women specifically, but the feminine consciousness is the leader. But first, to lead from that place, we first have to reintegrate that aspect of our consciousness individually and collectively. So I'll be speaking about that in a future video very soon. Let me just feel into if there's anything else that I wanted to share in this transmission. It's been longer than I expected, but hopefully there's been some value in it for you. No, I think that's everything. So I'm going to lovingly bow out. I hope you are well. I would love to hear how you received this, what you're experiencing at this time. And as always, if you're not already subscribed and you enjoyed this content, please feel free to subscribe, share, like. It really helps my channel reach more people who need this content. And I look forward to connecting with you again really soon. Take good care, guys.